All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Katia Lopez. I am the program manager at Create California, and I'm very excited to have you all join us today for Policy and Practice, the Impact of Prop 28 on Districts and Arts Organizations. So this is the agenda, a little welcome. We'll have a case study presented to us about Lynwood USD, Q&A for that presentation. And then we'll have Wested talk about the initial impact of Prop 28 on community arts organizations and have Q&A section for that presentation. And then at the end, we'll have resources, future events, and a wrap up. So yeah, that's from me. I will go ahead and pass it to Ricky.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ricky Aviles. I am the program director here at Create California, and we have some wonderful panelists here with us today. I wanted to do a quick frame up because it might shock some folks, but there are still a lot of people who don't know what Prop 28 is or just starting to learn about Prop 28. And so in 2022, California voters overwhelmingly approved this ballot initiative. It is now known as the Arts in Music and Schools Act. And it is $1 billion annually for arts education in schools. Now, the breakdown is a little bit more complex and nuanced than that. There's about 80% of a school site's allocation that can go towards hiring teaching personnel. 20% can go towards other things like partnerships and materials. If you want to learn more about Prop 28 and all of those details, feel free to reach out to us. I will make sure I put my name in an email in the chat. Or check out our website. There's a lot more information on the Arts and Music in Schools Act. We won't get too much into the weeds about the letter of the law. We know that there are a lot of concerns around it, but mostly why we're doing this webinar is because we've heard from so many community-based organizations that they don't quite know what to do when engaging schools around Prop 28 funds. And so that's why we have Dr. Sharon here with us today. And then we have Dr. Mariana Astorga-Almanza, who is going to share with you a little bit about her experience with the waiver process at Lynwood Unified School District. This is also another reason we're doing this webinar. Many folks are confused about what the waiver looks like, what it can be used for. And so we asked Mariana to come in and share her experience as a VAPA coordinator. And she's also a board member at Create California. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to her to discuss the waiver process. Excuse me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Mariana Astorga-Almanza. I'm the Visual and Performing Arts Coordinator for the Lynwood Unified School District, and I'm also a board member for Create California. Prior to being in this role here in Lynwood, I was a national board certified teacher. I taught middle school band and orchestra before I made the leap to district level administrator. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about our process from getting that allocation from Prop 28 to activating those funds. Next slide, please. Before I tell you about our process, I want to let you know a little bit about our school district. We have 17 schools, 12 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 comprehensive high schools, and 1 continuation high school. We have just under 11,000 students, 95% of which are Hispanic Latino. About 25% of those students are English learners, and about 95% of our student population is considered to be socioeconomically disadvantaged. Our allocation for Prop 28 that we're going to be talking about today is for fiscal year 24, and we received $2.2 million. Next slide, please. Baseline arts programming that we have in our district without considering Prop 28. In our elementary schools, we provide weekly instruction TK through grade 6 through a partnership with PS Arts. It's been a dream of mine since I started here in this role to have our own teachers, but Lynwood Unified currently does not hire its own certificated credentialed arts teachers, not yet. After school, we provide program for ballet folklorico and mariachi 2 times a week at all 12 of our elementary schools. At the middle school, We provide daily instruction in the arts for 7th and 8th graders. We have a full-time music teacher at both schools, a visual arts teacher at both schools, and both schools have one section of an intro to film studies. At our high schools, also have daily instruction in the arts for our 9th through 12th graders. We have dance at Lynwood High School, full-time dance teacher, drama teacher at Fireball High School, and she currently teaches one section, but we're growing. And we have band directors at both high schools, and then we have visual and media arts teachers at all three of our schools, including our continuation school. Next slide, please. We had the allocation. We were waiting for some clarity from the CDE. Before we got to spending, we needed to have a plan. And I know that some school districts were ready to go, but we weren't. We wanted to make sure that we had a solid foundation before moving forward. And so in our district, we have a team called the Arts Advocacy Team, which is one teacher representative from each of our 17 schools. And we meet on a monthly basis to talk about the arts. And what's amazing about this team is that I've been able to build their capacity to lead over the years. And now they're in-school expert on Prop 28, which I think is amazing. The next thing that we did is we partnered with the LA County Department of Arts and Culture to update our arts strategic plan. And so that arts advocacy team served as the core of the group to update that arts strategic plan. And by the way, that was free. Thank you, LA County Department of Arts and Culture. They gave us the coaches to help make that happen. We also gathered stakeholder input. That's a very important component of Prop 28. And we conducted Google Form surveys in both English and Spanish for our students, families, and the teachers. And what's important to note here is that we received over 3,000 student responses. And what is important is that we want to make sure that we're not making decisions about them without them. And so the children spoke. And we also shared those findings with our school board and also provided an overview of Prop 28. Because as Ricky said, a lot of people still don't know about Prop 28 or all of the details. And so there was a lot of education. Once we had the stakeholder input, we had an updated strategic plan. I met one-on-one with each of our principals to review their allocation and also their survey data. Afterwards, we had a second meeting for a facilities walkthrough to take a look at the spaces and to hopefully identify spaces for the arts. Next slide, please. So we had a plan, and then there were delays. Our school district, like many other school districts, are dealing with declining enrollment. And what happened to us is LACO asked us to go into fiscal stabilization mode. And that led to some staff layoffs, and that created some uncertainty with our boarding cabinet. And they didn't feel comfortable moving forward, making decisions or hiring people. So because of that, we were delayed. I wanted to push forward, but we were delayed. And that's just the reality. You can have the best plans, and then there are things that are beyond your control. Something else that happened in our district is we had changes in district leadership. We have a new superintendent. One of our assistant superintendents lost her battle to cancer. We had to fill that position. Somebody else left. And so, excuse me, whenever you have a change in leadership, then there's this re-education component. Also in our school district, we have to rebuild one of our schools. In 2020, one of the ceilings collapsed at our schools and we had to shut it down, and we are currently in the process of rebuilding. But what that means is that once that school opens, another one's going to close and people are going to move around. And that just creates a lot of uncertainty for us in utilizing our Prop 28 funds. The other thing is the constant Prop 28 education that I have to provide. This whole process has made me very comfortable explaining what Prop 28 is, and I'm happy to share that here in our district, everyone from superintendent down to our painters, locksmiths, they know what Prop 28 is. I think it's wonderful. I've also received requests from vendors, out-of-state vendors, wondering what on earth is happening in California that we are ordering so many things. So a constant education on what Prop 28 is also because people don't know, they're not 100% sure before they want to move forward. And so that caused the delay. And then to be honest, the CDE waiver process was causing me so much anxiety. All these other things were about other people, but that CDE waiver process was so intimidating to me, and I just kept putting it off. I had other things to do, but really it's that I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't know what it was going to look like, and I'm somebody who likes to succeed, and I didn't want to hear no. Um, and it was just scary. So, next slide, please. So finally got the courage. And I partnered with impact-focused advisors to help me develop that waiver narrative. I needed help, guys. I wanted to do it myself, but sometimes it's okay to ask for help. And so what I ended up asking for was reallocating 90% of the 80% for the staffing funds towards building the infrastructure here in our school district. Remember how I mentioned that we don't hire our own arts teachers? Well, now that we have Prop 28 funds, we are going to hire them. But in the survey results, people wanted music. They wanted band programs at the elementary school. And so we can't just start. We need instruments, we need chairs. There's a whole bunch of things that you need. So I asked for 90% of the 80%. I didn't ask for 100% of the 80%. And I know it's getting a little confusing, but the reason is I wanted to ensure that we had a little bit of money left so that we could start hiring this school year with fiscal year 24 funds. And guess what? I applied and I got approved after the first try, and I heard back within 24 hours. So that was back in June of 2025. And I was so relieved. Like, I really just had a lot of anxiety about this, about applying for that waiver. But I got it. So, yay. Next slide, please. Okay. So we got the waiver, hit the ground running. But remember, we were talking about staff layoffs and fiscal stabilization mode. We also started having these conversations about closing schools. And so I thought I could move forward. There was a pause in enacting that plan because we were talking about closing schools. Ultimately, that didn't happen for us this school year. And I know other school districts are in similar situations because of that declining enrollment. So after another delay, I was finally able to move forward. And here's what I did. First, I created a new job description for an elementary itinerant music teacher. I used the existing music teacher position that I had, and then I looked at EdJoin and looked at what everybody else was putting out there and kind of made our version of an elementary itinerant music teacher job description. I'm happy to share that it was board approved in March of 2026. And then I submitted the PRF, the personnel request form, for 6 positions, and it's somewhere in the approval process. And so hopefully we will see those jobs posted on EdJoin very soon. And I'm really excited about that. The other thing is that we utilize an existing job description for instructional assistant in arts, media, and entertainment. And this was because of time. I was told that in order to approve a new job description, it had to go through a lot of back and forth with the union because it is a union represented role, and that it would take a couple of months. And since I wanted to ensure that we spent our fiscal year 24 funds, I used the existing job description, and we actually held interviews yesterday for those positions. So very exciting stuff that's happening now. The other thing that we did was we prepared classrooms for music instruction. And I'm focusing primarily on the elementary schools because it's the biggest lift for us this year. I did those walkthroughs with the principals and facilities to find a dedicated space for music instruction. And as a former middle school band and orchestra teacher, I felt like I was very well equipped to identify an appropriate space. Collaborated with the middle school and high school music teachers to determine the needs and figure out what instruments are going to be taught. It's not going to be the full thing because these students are going to be getting weekly instruction. So we collaborated. We found the 5 main instruments that the students are going to be learning. They're also going to be playing ukulele, some percussion, everybody's favorite, the recorder. So once we determined what we were going to use, then I took a look at enrollment numbers and made sure that I was ordering enough instruments for the kids coming in. Then I had to vet and select vendors that could deliver quickly and also that had really good customer service. We purchased cabinets. I measured flute clarinet cases or took dimensions and made sure that they fit in the cabinets, measured the classrooms, purchased chairs, music stands, classroom technology. And that picture there is of one of our warehouse delivery guys because they were sending me pictures as they were delivering instruments to classrooms. They're like, hey, check this out, or, this room got painted. So it was a wonderful process. Next slide, please. As I was mentioning, people from all parts of the district know what Prop 28 is. And this really taught me so much, and it made me activate all of the relationships that I've built throughout my 10 years here in Lynwood Unified. So I was working with principals, I was working with secretaries because somewhere along the way, I also decided that I would be responsible for getting all of the quotes for all of the schools for about $2 million worth of equipment. I don't know what I was thinking, but I don't think I would have it any other way because I really felt like I was the best person to make these decisions. Some principals didn't know that music teachers could be credentialed. So there was still that education component. Secretaries were receiving direction from someone that was not their principal. So that was a little bit challenging. I worked obviously with human resources to develop those job descriptions, with accounting, setting up those account strings and moving money and making sure that the budgets were set up properly. Working with the purchasing department, Prop 28 purchase orders get priority. Yay. They're getting issued every day. Um, the warehouse, I have a good relationship with the manager, with the delivery drivers. As I mentioned, they're sending me pictures when things are coming in. And so it's really exciting to see that this is happening. It's actually happening. Also, I work with facilities. So we're painting classrooms, we're replacing ceiling tiles, we're addressing some issues in the classrooms themselves. Earlier today, I got a phone call from the warehouse, like, I have this PO, where does it go? Immediately followed by one of our painters who said he went through to the other classrooms to let me know who's ready for painting and who still needs a little bit of a nudge. And then I also worked with those vendors, of course, that I could just pretty much have on speed dial and they know the sound of my voice. Um, the workflow has been a little hectic, gonna be honest. It's about $2 million worth of equipment that we're purchasing across all of the sites, and that represents 165 requisitions. So that means I got at least 165 quotes, at least 165 purchase orders, and then I got to pay those invoices. Um, it requires active and regular follow-up, visits to our warehouse at least 2 times a week just to see what's coming in. And signing and submitting those invoices has been interesting. I've never signed so many invoices in my life. But when I take them up to accounts payable, it says Prop 28 and they have priority processing. So it feels good to be at the front of the line for once, as the arts have taken a back seat for so many years, but here in our district, then I really feel supported and it's paying off the relationships that I've built over those years to be able to call on people and having them be willing to help me out. Those invoices, I did have one of those office hours meetings with the CDE, and they did say those invoices have to be paid by June 30th. And for those of you who work in school districts, usually you have to receive the items by June 30th, and then you can pay them at some point in July because we're net 30. But that's not going to fly for Prop 28. Those invoices need to be paid by June 30th. So we really need to be receiving by the end of May. Next slide, please. I feel like I've gained so many new gray hairs as a result of this process. I've lost some sleep. I've definitely felt stress. The work-life balance hasn't been there, but I feel like ultimately it will all be worth it. Especially when I think about seeing a music teacher with students in a music classroom on a carpet that I ordered and, pulling cabinets out of or instruments out of cabinets that I ordered, or like it's all going to come together and it's going to be a beautiful moment. And so when I'm really stressed out, I just remember it's going to be worth it. So some key takeaways for district leaders: make sure that you're planning for long-term impact. I think that in our school district, we wanted to make sure that we had a really good plan and we wanted to make sure that we did it right. Because if you make a poor decision, just say as an instrument, if I buy $100 instrument, it's going to need to be replaced a lot sooner. So talking about like investing in quality things or having those conversations with other people, collaborating, it's going to take longer, but really you have to take the time to do it right and have a solid plan. Um, Make sure that you're communicating your plans transparently. I'm hearing from other school districts that the money has already been spent and people haven't been consulted. Your plan shouldn't be a secret. It shouldn't be difficult to find. Share it with as many people as possible so that everyone knows the plan and can also repeat it to you. Um, Make sure that you're spending your allocation strategically and also on time, because it doesn't seem like the CDE is going to be flexible on it. It's June 30th. You need to spend that money and you need to have paid those invoices, and anything that's unused is going to go back to the CDE. So I'm getting a weekly report from accounts payable. Let me know what I still have to pay and sign off on. So have those good relationships with people. So spend your money. And then ultimately is stay true to the intent and the promise of Prop 28. I think that, as I mentioned, when I feel overwhelmed, I think back to it's going to be worth it. Um, we're going to have more access for our students, high quality arts education access for all of our students. And I think that that's what keeps me going even when I feel stressed out. It's going to be worth it and it's going to be amazing. And so if you haven't, hopefully you've already applied for your waiver. Um, the clock is ticking. And so that is all. Thank you.
Hooray. Thank you so much, Mariana, Dr. Astorga-Almanza. We're so happy to have you on our board and also so grateful for you being open and transparent about this process. A quick reminder to folks as we transition into Q&A, um, go ahead and enter your questions in that Q&A feature. You're also more than welcome to speak live. We can give you the capability to do that and ask your question live. Just indicate your desire to do so. Allison will be supporting us in this next phase. One note I wanted to make, though, reminder that all paths and allocations are different at each school site. And so even though your school might not have the same exact path or process as Lynwood Unified, it's really important to see what's possible when you have community input and a clear vision and long-term planning. I think that's really the goal here. Also, I've heard from so many folks about the fear of applying for a waiver, um, but a reminder that we don't have enough teachers to fill classrooms across the state. And a lot of schools and districts have gotten creative with this. And as long as you can prove that you're trying to hire personnel and that you're following the intent and promise of Prop 28, as Dr. Astorga Almanza shared, uh, that's what's important. As I always said, feel free to reach out to us. And then, are there any questions for Mariana?
So there's a couple questions. One is just said, just to be clear, you were able to submit a waiver to use Prop 28 funds to reallocate that 80% towards infrastructural and material needs. So just I think some little clarification of how much from that 80% of the original you asked to be reallocated.
Yes, so for us, and just this is just rough, $2.2 million. Let's just say the 2 million was supposed to go for staffing, but we asked for 90% of the 80% to be reallocated towards that 20% category. So then I had to add those numbers together. But we did ask, we cannot hire, we don't have the equipment that we need to support instruction. And so, yes, that was the request. We asked for 90% of the 80% for staff to be reallocated for equipment, materials, partnerships.
And then I just had a question too. When you mentioned about impact-focused advisors, is that a statewide group? Was there a cost involved in working with them? How did that work if other districts want to use that kind of
They
process?
can reach out, but it is a company.
Yeah.
I was the test to trying this out, and so impact focused advisors um, really helped me go past this hurdle to applying.
Thank you. That's it for the questions, Ricky.
Actually, two more just came in.
Oh, okay.
So I'll read one. Any advice for VAPA who haven't been part of the Prop 28 decisions and would like to know how the funding has been spent?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, like you work in a district and you don't know what's happening? I mean, is that accurate?
That's also what I'm gathering.
Okay, that's uncomfortable. I feel that asking your assistant superintendent of educational services um, is a good place to start. I think this kind of goes back to the part where I was talking about it shouldn't be secretive. It should be posted on the district's website. I also feel that I received support. The arts advocacy team in my district does include teachers' union representatives. And so the teachers' union was asking, what is the plan? And so they were pushing district leadership because there's a like a leadership team of the teachers union that meets regularly with the district leadership. And so perhaps that might be a place where you can ask for some support as well if you don't feel comfortable asking directly.
And then the final question was, what other regular art lessons do elementary students receive?
So currently they receive weekly instruction from PS Arts, and we do a 20-week rotation model. They do 10 weeks of visual art or music or theater or dance, depending on the teaching artist availability. And then they transition to another rotation. So 10 weeks and 10 weeks.
And just to follow up to that, is the funding being used for that PS Arts partnership from Prop 28 or other funding?
The funding for PS Arts is coming out of our LCAP supplemental and concentration. And so this is something that we intend to keep the partnership. We do want to hire our own music teachers. We're going to hire 6 to serve at the 12 elementary schools, so 1 teacher at 2 schools. But we recognize that they won't be able to serve all of the grade levels, and so we do want to keep the partnership in place. And also, if we think back to what Prop 28 says, you're going to supplement, not supplant. And you're also in your worksheet, you have to report how much money you spent on arts education. And so if the CDE is saying that like you spent this much this year and next year it's going to drop, but then your Prop 28 funds increase, then you're looking at supplanting. So just want to be mindful of that. Because sometimes, and I've even, I've heard it here, I've heard it in other districts. Well, next year we can use Prop 28 money for that. And I have to remind people, no, we supplement, not supplant. That's not allowed.
Okay, thank you again so much, Dr. Astorga-Almanza. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Katya to move us along.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, we're gonna go on ahead. All right. So happy to introduce Dr. Sharon Herpin. We at Create California have had a long collaboration with Dr. Herpin to talk and to learn about research on Prop 20 implementation. And they're here today to talk about that and preliminary findings for community arts organizations. So take it away, Sharon.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Great conversation about districts, and now we're going to completely change gears and talk a little about research and community arts organizations. So we received a grant from the NEA to collect some data, and we've been working with Create California to continue releasing that. So we did release a report with preliminary findings at the end of last year that's available on wested.org. But today I actually have some updated data that I get to share as well. So I'm excited about that. Next slide. So if you are not familiar with WestEd, we are a large nonpartisan research development and service agency. We work across the entire country. Our mission really is to promote excellence, improve learning, and increase opportunity for children, youth, and adults. And our headquarters is in San Francisco, and we have offices throughout California. So I'm usually in our Seal Beach office in Orange County, California. But we do work all over the place, and we've been working with Create I've been working with Create. I think I'm on my fifth executive director with Veronica now, but had a wonderful partnership to be able to continue working with this. So let's move on. Let's go to the next slide. So we did receive a grant from the NEA that now Create is helping because we lost our grant, but through that, we were able to collect some data early on about implementation of Prop 28. So we started off with conducting 10 interviews with people across the state just to get an understanding of what they were doing. And then we supplemented that again with convening. We had about 18 people representing many different organizations across the state to really get a firsthand understanding of the different groups and what they were doing with their Prop 28 funding, or at that time, even what they were planning on doing. And then we turned their responses into a survey so people could just kind of check boxes and be like, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And in that survey, we ended up with 462 people across the state who completed the survey for us. Now, within that, we had different paths based on where people were employed. So we had a path for county offices of education level staff, a path for like district and schools, and then we did also have a path specific for our community arts organizations. So we did, on the updated data, we have 90 respondents who are representing arts organizations. Next slide. Just to get an idea about those respondents, almost 3/4 of them work for nonprofit organizations. So these were teaching artists, executive directors, fundraisers, program directors, a variety of people, a handful that worked for-profit arts organizations, and then a similar group that worked for some type of other organization or worked for themselves. They were kind of like self-employed, either maybe an independent teaching artist or an arts consultant that just didn't want to classify themselves as at like an organization at time. Next slide. Happy to say we hit 31 out of 58 of the counties. So we had at least one person from a lot around the state. And as you can see from our map, green are the counties that are represented. So we got quite a bit of Southern California, quite a bit of Central Bay Area. I know a lot of people look at Bay Area as Northern California, but there's such a huge chunk of north of that. So some of those more rural areas, unfortunately, we did not get through arts organizations. They might not even have arts organizations in that sense. So this kind of made sense of where we got a lot of our groups, where the data are. So next slide. I want to get into a bit of the findings because this is the interesting, but at least to me, it's the interesting stuff. And this actually aligns with what some of the things that even Lynwood was saying. Our arts organizations, a lot of them, surprisingly, like 31%, about a third, said they've had some positive outcomes happening from Prop 28, that they've got expansion happening. They're being brought in a little more because districts do have money I'm guessing most of those are districts that got waivers. There's still a large percent, a quarter of them themselves talked about confusion. They had a lot of questions. They were talking, some of the responses were like, the districts don't know what to do. The districts don't, know how to use Prop 28, or they don't know what it is. So, and then we had about a quarter that also had negative impact. And that is everything from our program is shrinking. The district didn't want to use Prop 28 money, so to fund us, so they canceled our contracts. We heard a couple arts orgs that said we had to close our doors. We lost all of our contracts. We had several that said the district came and poached our teaching artists because of that 80%. If they don't have a waiver, that you do have to, Prop 28 requires 80% to be spent on credentialed or classified teaching staff. So we did hear several saying to get that 80%, they are just going out there and trying to get teaching artists directly from arts organizations. So that was one of the negative impacts that we had kind of heard, but it definitely came through in the data as well. Next slide. One thing, and this is not in the current report, this is actually something that I just started digging deeper into the data recently and decided to look at how different, if there were any variations based on their urbanicity. So we looked at the people who classified themselves as being an urban area, a suburban area, and a rural area, because we know how different these are, and we've seen other data that expressed how things were happening or not happening, and how rurals have definitely a harder, more difficult time, like even finding teaching artists, getting them in. So I wanted to break the data out a little that way. And the large, that 30% that said like it's been positive, most of that was urban. They were the ones that were saying like, oh yeah, we're getting more, we're expanding our services, we're now going into more districts. So the positive outcomes, those expansion opportunities, were mostly in urban areas. However, it was very kind of dichotomous. Well, 45% were saying, yeah, we have good opportunities. 29% were saying it's been negative. So they were also saying they're losing contracts, they're losing their teaching artists, that it's had like negative ramifications for their teaching artists as well. So the urban group had their own kinds of things going on. The suburban group were like, we're just in pause mode almost. They're like, not really committal. We're not doing, like, they're just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. They didn't have clear outcomes. It's just like, we're in hold. And the rurals were really coming across saying, there's been no impact, minimal outcomes. And one thing that really came out there that we didn't see in the other groups was that 80-20 rule. They were saying that that was really a barrier for these rural areas because they're having such a hard time recruiting teachers, finding teachers who can come in. So they're really searching for some alternative ways of getting arts for their students. So next slide. So we did also ask the arts orgs their thoughts on like the potential future. And the one thing that really resonated, whether they were reporting that it's been a positive thing or a negative thing, people really just saw Prop 20 as such an opportunity to get more arts for students. So they were a lot of like comments about appreciation, that they're grateful to see this. Even one that said, we're going to be closing our doors, but we know in the long run, that Prop 20 is going to be helping students. So they could still like see the benefit. There's a lot of optimism among the arts organizations that students are going to get more arts, and that's our goal. That's why we're here. There were like 20%. expressed concerns about their sustainability. A lot of that kind of that suburban group, like we haven't seen anything yet, but we anticipate kind of issues, especially if they're seeing their teaching artists leaving their organization to go directly into schools. But there is about 18, almost 20% who are anticipating in the future this is going to be organizational growth for them. Now, the caveat to the organizational growth is they were often saying they're modifying their business plans to get that growth. So they may be closing out some of their programs where they were providing direct service to students in schools. And now they're thinking like, we're going to expand by providing professional development to the arts educators. Or we're going to completely change like our focus, our mission to see that growth and fill other gaps that are coming out. So that's what we're seeing with a lot of the arts organizations. So I'm happy to ask questions if there's anything that's come up or.
Thank you, Dr. Herpin. I really appreciate you speaking on this and in this data. Can you tell us a little bit more about the rest of I know that this, unfortunately, this research project was stopped short, but I would love for you to explain a little bit about what we might see in the future with the rest of the research.
The rest of the research to me is really exciting because there's a lot more quantitative data. I'm a total data geek, so I'm looking forward to digging in a little deeper and doing some more of the analyses. Some preliminary things, it has been quite split. When we put out this survey, there were a lot of schools and districts that hadn't used any of their funding yet.
Right.
And we're now reaching the end of year 3 as Mariana had mentioned, like funding has to be spent, that year funding, that 2024 allocation has to be spent by the end of next month.
Right.
So at the time, there were still a lot of districts and schools that hadn't used it. A lot of people saying they didn't know how to use it. They didn't know what they could use their funding for. There was a lot of confusion regarding supplement versus supplant and just a lot of like kind of fear. Like people didn't want to get in trouble. They didn't want to do it wrong and then have to like give the money back or something, or have CDs say, oh no, you couldn't do that. And now the district's on the hook for the kilns or the instruments or whatever it was they bought. So there's definitely a bigger delay in people getting their funds out. Even going along, like we talk, some of the data that we'll be presenting in the future when we get deeper into the analysis is going to be around like what is needed to actually have equitable arts access across the state. And I know one of the things that often came up was a VAPA coordinator. VAPA coordinator and strategic plans are like high points for you need to have these things in place because you need a champion. You need someone like Mariana who's going to go to the warehouse and make sure the stuff's there, who's going to go onto the facilities and be like, yep, this room, we can change this over. So you need that VAPA coordinator, that champion who's going to take on that role. And even the other things you mentioned, plans. Having strategic plans was a huge part of the things that were coming out from from the research. So hopefully we're going to be continuing that and hope to get some reports more specific to the schools, districts, and counties later this year.
Thank you. Dominique, were there any questions in the chat that we can lift up?
We have we had a couple of similar questions with folks just asking about recommendations for the best way to partner with schools and districts. Sorry about that. If you might have any recommendations or findings around that.
I would want to dig a little deeper. Like I have like my thoughts, but that's not necessarily the data because that wasn't a particular question we asked at that time. But I mean, we are hearing said people changing things, changing up their models, finding different ways. One thing is supporting the districts. Like there's still a lot of confusion. So if you are as an arts org feel like you're familiar with the Prop 28 and you're really knowledgeable about it, share that knowledge with districts you're interested in working with it and let them know, like, hey, here's how you can go through the waiver process so that you can work with us, or here's how we can support you, here's how we can partner. Here's how you can use that 20% to work with us. So there's definitely things where they're pivoting to do things a little differently and being creative, which I mean that's part of why I love working with the arts world. Like there's so much creativity. So it's just sometimes just getting creative and thinking a little differently.
Thank you so much. And then there are actually two questions that just came in, two very different ones. One is if there's any data being collected about teaching artists moving from teaching artist positions into district positions. I guess specifically numbers. Oh, and then the other question is what happens when the money that doesn't get spent? Or what will happen to the money that doesn't get spent and goes back to CDE? Will it be reallocated, or what happens to it?
We For the community arts, we don't have money, or I'm sorry, we have some numbers specific about the number of people who have gone from community arts organizations into districts. I do actually have numbers from the districts and counties about how many people they have hired if they gave that to us. So that is something that we'll be presenting in our report around how many people have, how many even like FTEs have been allocated and increased as a result of Prop 28. I can say there's a couple that say they actually lost FTEs. Now, whether that's because the district wasn't using Prop 28 or because there's declining enrollment, which is happening across the entire state. I'd have to dig deeper into some of that to find that, but that's definitely been an issue. I think in terms of the money, it goes back to CDE. I don't know if there's somebody on grade.
Yeah, so the money does go back into that pot and gets reallocated. So yes, so it still depends on the school's student enrollment and also on the percentage of students who receive free and reduced lunch. So it'll still use that formula. But yes, it goes back into that pot and gets reallocated. Are there any further questions, Dominique?
Yeah, we actually have a couple more if there's time.
Yeah, let's do it.
One is, are there any narratives or anecdotes about success stories of how NGOs and districts have worked well together, just kind of best models that can be shared? The question is about admin working more as an arts coordinator role and the teachers then becoming district employees. So I think they're just trying to get at any specifics of like best practices.
We definitely see some promising practices, especially around partnerships. In some of our rural areas, we actually have even heard of districts collaborating and pooling their funds to be able to support and work with different arts orgs and different groups. So there are definitely some highlights out there. That is actually one of the things we're hoping to elevate more in the future. We had to get kind of this first round of data through. But we'd love to actually do some case studies and even present some like models of promising practices. I don't want to say best practices because California is so unique and we have so many different needs across the state. So, but there's definitely some like models of successful things happening around the state that can be tailored and that others can work on. So definitely hoping in the future to be able to present more of those models. Couple years ago when Prop 28 first came out, we worked with Create California to create to develop a couple like profiles of districts that are available as part of the Prop 28 toolkit on Create's website. And there's a few on there that offer kind of like models and ideas as well of how you might be able to work with districts and counties.
Yeah, thank you. Dominique, any last questions?
There is one last one. This kind of also has to do with promising practices, are there any recommendations thus far for part-time VAPA staff turnover? Um, they were naming that all of the allocations is part-time for VAPA designations, and so they're seeing some turnover happening in their district.
Mariana, if you have any, or if anyone else has any recommendations, we might have to do a little research on that. Yeah. Okay. So currently we don't have any recommendations, but I think, thank you for asking that question, and we'll have all the questions that were answered. I have them all, they'll get automatically downloaded. So I'm gonna ask some other of our experts that we are connected to see if they have an answer to that particular question, and hope to get back to you with that answer in our follow-up email. That being said, thank you all so much for providing this information. And thank you all to the attendees for coming and watching and learning with us, and for asking those questions. Have a quick call to action. This is just for next year. What's the plan? The first allocation of the Prop 28 funds, a wrap up this year, as was mentioned. It's time to prepare for the next. Let's continue to do our best to advocate, to try to build those connections with those districts, to ask what's the plan and how can we offer support. We have a great resource that that on our Create California website. And again, this slide deck and our follow-up email will have links to all those resources that were mentioned. And if you're interested in advocating for your local school community, Create California has an Arts Now program, a leadership advocacy training program, that is a 3-year program, and it is a statewide network of arts education advocates who participate in professional development and local arts education coalition building. In that follow-up email, I'll share that link, but applications open at the end of the month. If you want to continue the conversation, thank you, Dominique, and thank you, Allison, for being here to help us uplift these questions. We always have collaborations with both of Friends of Sacramento Arts and Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area. We're having a meetup May 18th at 10 a.m. on Zoom. Should you want to continue the conversation, we'll have Dominique talk a little bit about her experience in community table talks. So also thinking about how to best help community arts orgs and districts collaborate. And I believe that is it for me. Any last messages, though? Okay. Ricky?
No, just another thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your insight and expertise. And also, as always, thank you to Allison and Dominique for supporting. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a good rest of your day, evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.